We had talked about, see, the water was gonna come right up to our backyard. We had talked about building a little marina or boat dock, whatever you call it down there. We had talked about that. But when the water began to come on up and to fill, that's when our son rode his horse out into a stream and was drowned. We lost all desire, right.
Terry and I would take turns going by horseback and getting the cows up, and that's what he was doing that day. He'd gone down to get the cows up.
When I came in from work, it's around 6 o'clock, I think. I pulled in and they met me at the car and told me that Terry was missing. And I beat it down there where they found his hat, his saddle, and his boots. He had pulled them off. These little old branches, we're gonna call it, run down like this, you know, low places.
Little creeks.
And the water was backed up in there, and I waded out where they found him. And when I got to the edge of that little ravine, water was hit me here, but I could take my toe and slide it off. And the only thing I can figure is he was riding that horse across that, and when that horse hit the deep water, I would say that the horse came up snorting and knocked the breath out of him, because that horse had shoes which is made of iron, and there was not a bruise on him anywhere. It almost had to be, because he could swim, it almost had to be a freak accident like that.
During the 1908 flood, the famed Creek poet, journalist, and statesman Alexander Posey lost his life in the North Canadian River. Posey and 2 other men were on their way to Eufaula from Shakota by train. Several days of rain had swollen the North Canadian River, and water was rapidly running over the tracks of the bridge that ran over the river. Due to the waters running over the tracks and the debris running under the support beams of the track, it was impossible to support the weight of the train. Posey decided to use the rental of a flat-bottomed boat to cross the river. As the 3 men made their way through the swift current, disaster struck. The strong current capsized their boat, throwing all 3 men into a perilling situation. Their only chance of a hopeful survival was to swim over the rails, because going under would be certain death due to the debris that had gathered under the already weak structure. Due to exhaustion, Posey was unable to help himself from drowning. The Mississippi flood of 1927 brought national attention to this issue, and Congress passed the first Flood Control Act. But the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl, however, followed on the heels of this congressional movement, and the act was placed on the back burner.
At the conclusion of World War II, Congress, under the direction of President Harry Truman, began the process of addressing the devastating results that flooding was causing economically and toward national growth and security. Congress passed the most comprehensive flood control act in the nation's history. On July 24, 1946, the Rivers and Harbors Act was passed. This act was a comprehensive flood control and navigational plan with the intentions of developing our vast natural waterway systems for the economic growth of our country and to render aid to the vicious cycles of devastation caused by flooding.
The Arkansas River Basin was the only major river system left in the United States that had not been developed for navigable purposes. However, for the next 9 years, very little was done to fund the majority of the projects due to the enormous debt that was affixed to the expense of World War II. In 1953, Dwight D. Eisenhower was elected President of the United States. Eisenhower had a great vision of creating a transcontinental highway system that would connect the East Coast to the West Coast. Eisenhower understood that America's greatest strength lay in its people and their willingness to work, so the national infrastructure of highways and navigable river systems became the epitome of Eisenhower's plan.
With the combination of leadership, strong determination, and the will to achieve the infrastructure of a navigable river system in the state of Oklahoma, these members of Congress, Robert S. Kerr, John McClellan, Sam Rayburn, Carl Albert, and Ed Edmondson, were destined to change economical and geographical structure of eastern Oklahoma, along with a host of local leaders.
Charles Crumpler of Shakota and Dean Parkhurst of Eufaula created the first Lake Eufaula Association. The Lake Eufaula Association was developed totally towards securing congressional funding for the Lake Eufaula project. Although there was a large contingency of opposition from residents in the southern portion of McIntosh County and the northern portion of Pittsburgh County, mainly because of the vast amount of farmland that would be lost.
Because of all the farmland, and I like to hunt and fish back then, and there was massive area to hunt and fish. But when the lake come up, you know, it's like being a big fish in a little pond. You can find all kinds of fish and stuff in ponds, but in the big lake, now you've got to really work at it. And then the lake wasn't stocked like it is now. It didn't have as many fish as it does now, and it was harder to fish. But all the land that was covered up, the pecan groves, the trees, and bulldozers just came in down below our house and just flattened everything. And it was, I didn't like watching what they were doing. Just pushing down the trees, and they didn't even burn them, they just pushed them down. And the fences and all. And back then I didn't think it was a good idea. Now, seeing, 50 years later, yeah, it's great.
The LEA, however, understood that the development of Lake Eufaula would have a devastating blow to the existing economic environment of the region, but they also knew that a steamroller called Progress would be coming.
One opinion of a businessman in Eufaula, Rob Hill, he had a TV store, and I worked for him part-time. And he was sitting there one day, they were building 69 around town. Yeah, that is 69 over here. They was building that. And Rob was sitting there looking out on Main Street there. He was there where the bank is, along in there where the bank, State National Bank, Eufaula Bank. And he was looking out and he said, Lois, said when they opened that highway up there, said this town will die. Said you can get out there on the main street and play doogies, marbles. But see how wrong he was. You can't get down Main Street.
In 47 and 48, you were sent here from the Tulsa office. Could you tell us about both those trips down?
Well, there's not much to tell about 47. The road out here to the dam site was a dirt road. And I know I got stuck here. But we were down here just merely picking up some samples of the soils for evaluation. In 1947, we were just here for a few days, but in 1948, we came back, and I was the inspector in charge of the core drilling operation. And if I remember correctly, we had 8 truck-mounted drilling rigs. And we were drilling out these 3 dam sites, one on the North Canadian, one on the South Canadian, and one on Gaines Creek.
So they had there was 3 sites. Originally there was 3 sites for dams instead of 1.
That's right. Initially in 47 they were talking about 1, but then it went to 3, and then it went back to 1 after a public hearing that they had. I think in 48 or 49.
On August 4th, 1956, the first shovel of dirt was turned at now what is known as the Core Project Office. During construction, 33 miles of railroad and 140 miles of roads and highways were relocated. The portion of Highway 69 from Texana Road to Canadian was the first to be 4-laned on U.S. Highway 69. Projects were all contracted through the Corps of Engineer office out of the Tulsa district and were all on strict timelines. All major projects worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week until completion. Many have told us they remember going out to the work sites to have Sunday lunch with their parents because they were required to work on Sundays to ensure the project's completion on time. It was estimated from 1957 to 1964 that the population of McIntosh County went from 20,000 to nearly 40,000 due to the amount of work this project required. Eufaula became a boomtown, and like any boomtown, every empty lot was turned into a makeshift RV park, and every available room was rented. Restaurants, grocery stores, gas stations, and the city of Eufaula all benefited from the almost overnight migration of workers.